are enjoying the stream. And also check out Stevie A. Smith. All his social media links are in the description of this video. Check him out. And got to get into the direction of the franchise under Carroll and Schneider. Now, they are lockstead. I believe they came to the franchise together the same year. Is that right? I think it was
2009 or 2010?
I think it was one of those. But basically, they've been together for more than a decade, right? Mm-hmm. And I've been very skeptical of Schneider. I would love to hear your opinion about this. But his draft picks, I feel like you guys haven't really drafted well on the defensive side of the ball. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seemed like the picks and also trading for Jamal Adams, 2 first-round picks, in my opinion, just looking from afar, it hasn't really worked out. But what are your thoughts on Schneider's draft approach and also the Jamal Adams trade? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
See, the thing with Seattle is they're always trying to think outside the box, right? They're always trying to think, or maybe they don't think this, but it appears as if they're smarter than the room. And when you look at the guys that they draft, especially in the first round, they're always drafting guys, and it's like, he was supposed to be drafted way later, or Seattle reached, or what's Seattle doing? Rashad Penny comes to mind. Even Bruce Irvin, who was a solid pick for Seattle when he was taken in the first round back in 2012, everybody was like, what? He was supposed to be drafted a lot later on. Jermaine Ifedi didn't work out. And so I could definitely see your point when you talk about Seattle and their draft history, but I feel like that really only applies to Seattle's early round picks. You look at recent memory. Jordan Brooks was drafted in the first round. Like I said, second in the NFL in tackles last year. Darrell Taylor, taken in the second round in the 2020 NFL draft, had 6.5 sacks last year. Definitely displayed a whole bunch of potential. And I think he's a perfect fit for what Seattle wants to do defensively. But as far as John Schneider, I feel like it's more Pete Carroll, and I've talked about this before, but Pete Carroll is the vice president of football operations. That means he gets final say over all personnel decisions. Now, I get it, and I understand that John Schneider is the GM in name. He obviously is going to have a lot of input, a lot of influence on who Seattle brings in via the draft, via trade, via free agency. But at the end of the day, this is Pete Carroll's team, and nothing's going to fly by unless, there's his approval. And so when we look at some of these draft picks, when we look at some of these trades, I'd actually point the finger at Pete Carroll. And you talk about, or you ask me about the Jamal Adams trade. Looking back in hindsight, obviously 2 first rounders, a 3rd round pick, and a starting safety, that's way too much. I mean, because for Russell Wilson, we only got 2 first rounders in return. It was 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and then 3 players.
Like 3 players, yeah.
3 players. And so I get that, but 2 first rounders, I mean, I'm still kind of tripping about how we weren't able to get at least a 3rd first rounder, or at least a pass with 10, maybe even a Bradley Chubb. And we'll get into that later, but that Jamal Adams trade, I think that's Pete Carroll. It has Pete Carroll written all over it. I mean, he's getting older, as we all know, oldest head coach in the NFL. He was looking to win now, and so that's why he gave up so much. But, man, I'm still happy that we have a Jamal on the team. I'm not saying I regret that trade. I just regret everything that we gave up. We gave up way too much capital. And, look, we would have had the 9th and the 10th pick in the first round of this year's draft.
Wow.
So if we would have just traded a 1st, a 3rd, a starting safety, and let's say maybe a mid-round pick, that would have been cool for Jamal. I don't think anyone was going to pony up 2 first-rounders. And so obviously we lost that trade badly, but Jamal's still somewhat young. And like I said, he is a foundational player on his defense. He did, set the NFL record for most sacks by DB with 9.5. And call it what you want. You can call him blitz boy. You can say that Seattle's, blitzed them way more than any other DB, but the facts are the facts. Most sacks by DB in NFL history, and he only played 12 games that year. And so hopefully in this new scheme, in this more aggressive scheme that Clint Hurd is looking to implement, hopefully he gets back to being what he does, and hopefully he has a career year in Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, you can't poo-poo on, Jamal Adams. That's what he does best, getting after the quarterback, playing to the line of scrimmage. I think playing in the zone coverage in the backfield, I don't think that's necessarily his strength. I think he's better utilized, around the line of scrimmage, getting after the quarterback, and it shows. That's why he got 9.5 sacks. So, but it'll be interesting to see. I know Pete Carroll's not going to say, okay, we're doing a complete rebuild, we're just going to tank. I know he's not going to say that, but it'll be interesting to see how this works out. Which guys you bring in via the draft. Free agency is pretty much over. I mean, there aren't really any significant guys on the market. I think Tyrann Mathieu, did he sign yet or no? I think he's still a free agent. So, I can't think of any big names out there that's still in the free agent market. But I was looking at the Seahawks depth chart. I just didn't see a lot on offense. I know you got DK, you got Tyler, and that brings me to my next point. What are your thoughts on possibly Drew Lock being the starter for the Seahawks?
You know, I wouldn't be completely opposed to it. I did have a talk and a conversation with former Seahawks wide receiver Michael Bumpus on my channel a couple of weeks ago, and he's not very on board, with the thought of Drew Lock starting for the Seattle Seahawks. But at the same time, he also did mention that, look, if this is a retooling type of year, right? Let's say Seattle does, it looks like they're rebuilding in year one, but they're actually retooling, if that makes sense. Look, Drew Lock is going to help us lose games. And if the goal is to get and target a quarterback in next year's NFL draft, then it's kind of a win-win. Because if he ends up losing games for us, it's like, okay, that's kind of what we expected. And then in next year's draft, we could target a quarterback high. Now, if he ends up winning games for us, then it's like, oh, shoot. We gave him weapons. We have, a solid defense, a solid foundation around him. Let's try to build around him and let's see what we got. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. But look, he is only 25 years old. He does have a rocket of an arm. He does have arguably the best wide receiver duo, if not a top 2, top 3 wide receiver duo in DK and Todd Lockett. I know Chris Carson's been banged up, but Rashad Penny last 5 weeks of the season, almost 700 yards rushing, led the NFL in yards per carry, had 200 more yards rushing in the last 5 weeks than Jonathan Taylor, the NFL's rushing champion. And so there are some pieces to work with. I know the offensive line is a mess, but like I said, hopefully the draft, Seattle does look to address that. But I think with the Drew Lock, it's going to be a win-win situation, whether or not he helps us lose games or if he wins games, then we can kind of capitalize on that potential. But I wouldn't be completely opposed to it. I would like Seattle to bring in competition, though, whether that's going to be Geno Smith, whether that's a rookie in the draft. And I'm not in favor of this, but if Baker Mayfield somehow lands in Seattle, I just want to see Drew Lock pushed. And so we'll see what happens there.
With regards to Drew Lock, I mean, I was looking at his stats, and the guy's a turnover machine. In 2020 with Denver, he did have 15 INTs to 16 touchdowns. So I think it's safe to say he has questionable decision-making. But if he's able to rely on the running game, if Carson and Penny are healthy for the full year, which I don't think has happened yet in their tenure with the Seahawks, but if they can somehow stay healthy, maybe Drew Lock can hand the ball off 30 to 35 times. And, maybe the Seahawks, make some additions through the draft on the defensive side of the ball. Hey, you never know. You never say never. You never say never. That's for sure.